It also creates more foot traffic. So there is some relaxation. I don't know about Walmart though. I know that that would be huge. If Walmart came around, it would be huge.
The other thing that Best Buy says that I think is fascinating is it's really popular with their employees.
Yeah.
You know, it's a sense of satisfaction of doing something that's meaningful with this huge waste stream. So that's been kind of an unexpected thing that they've gotten, but that has been big there.
Good. Question down here.
So related to this conversation, it sounds like there's places where the markets are broken. We've heard that the materials and the raw inputs are valuable if they can be recaptured, but we're throwing them away because it's cheap to do that. We've got externalized costs to the environment. So can you make it a little more clear where the markets are broken? You know, we've heard from Dell that industry could do a great job of this, so why aren't you? Or what's the barrier in the market right now from this working?
Well, I would say that I think the fact that so many states have taken on government-run programs that increase the costs, and we're always going to comply with the state law. So it may just cost us a lot more to do so, which means those costs are passed along. So we believe that it will get better, but I think the industry does need a bit of a push. I'll be honest with you, and that's why we have sort of tried to come up with something that provides more incentive for companies, market-based incentives for companies to do the right thing. But you're right. I mean, it's going to take. The market is going to drive this, and we've got to find ways to get the industry to respond. We believe that market-driven forces, for example. There are some states that provide double counting of waste collected in rural areas to encourage companies to go out in the rural areas. If you have to reach a target goal and you collect 1.5 pounds for every pound that you collect in a rural area, that's an incentive, a market incentive to go out and collect in rural areas. That addresses a problem many legislators have. How about my rural counties where there's no Staples, there's no Goodwill, there's nothing. So that kind of market forces, I think, can drive the industry to doing more. But there needs to be some government incentive, but not necessarily a government-run program. And I think that's the difference that we see.
There's a question there in back. The guy with the mic, go ahead, and then we'll go to the next one.
Okay, thank you. I actually work for local government, and I am appalled at the system that we have to create, local government, not state government. So I'm actually responsible for collecting this stuff, keeping it out of the landfills, keeping public health safe, and all the things that government should be doing. Yesterday on the news, I hear that Apple has $100 billion in cash and they don't even know what to do with it. You hear horror stories of Foxconn and people jumping off buildings. Walmart I can't even go into because Walmart has great goals. I think if you drill down and look at what they've actually accomplished, you'd be rather disappointed. But that's an anecdote. Where I'm really going here, I want someone from industry to explain to me why a company like Apple doesn't look at this as a fabulous PR opportunity, as the right thing to do, as a wonderful thing to do. Down in South Bay, in the city of Cupertino, they've made a deal with that local government to take back all their Apple products. Anyone can walk into an Apple store and bring back that Apple product. But there's Apple products, granted. Here you go, I have one. But there's a gazillion products out there. Can you please explain to me where they're coming from? Because it puzzles me.
I would never pretend to get into the mind of Apple. I've been trying to figure them out for like 7 or 8 years now. But I will say that you're right. I mean, there does need to be positive incentives for companies to do it. I think that our company early on got involved with this simply because our CEO, Michael Dell, said that this is something we need to do. And by the way, it may help tip the scale on a sale. If a customer says, well, both of these products are equal, but I know that Dell's got a really good recycling program, maybe I'll go with Dell. So I'm not sure how, you can't quantify that really, and how much business you get out of it, but a company's got to look for opportunities like that. It's got to drive those opportunities by putting itself out there with an advantage. It might be something like we did plant a tree to reduce carbon footprint. We did a number of things. We have a bamboo cover for some of our laptop right now. So there's a lot of things you can do to sort of set yourself apart. I don't know why a piece of that $100 billion might go to something that Apple might do to aggressively, engage in a recycling program. I know that most of their products don't qualify. They have a very small market share in the household consumer market, which is mostly where these programs are. And many of their products are not on that list. They're iPhones, they're iPods. I'm not even sure about the iPads now. The iPads may meet the screen standard size, but I don't know if they meet the definitions otherwise. So I think they've not had to focus on it as much because they didn't have the huge volumes exposure. They don't have TVs. They do have some monitors out there, but again, most of their stuff is institutional. Schools, to some extent governments, and then the smaller consumer products. So that may be some reason why. As far as we're concerned, though, we're hoping that being considered a green leader is going to help drive the product.
Good. Barbara, you wanted to say?
I just want actually to double back on the question about the markets. I think that's actually a good question for the next panel, but
Yeah.
I just want to say the simple concept that the best way to make sure something gets recycled is to design it out of materials that have value
Yeah.
to recyclers. In other words, someone will buy them. And so that is like such a simple concept. Why isn't that like on the top of the list? It's not. And so I think the recyclers should develop.
but okay, so we can design these things out of gold and everything will be recovered.
need a
but
program for
nobody
that.
can afford them. Yeah.
Some of them are, and that's what's shocking to me is I think we've made, there's some subsidies to some certain industries that are actually undermining the whole economics of the system. And we have to look at that.
Dustin?
I just want to point out, so on the materials for solar,
Yeah.
the UN just came out with a report saying that total indium and tellurium that enters, that's actually overall recycled is less than 1%. This is a very rare material.
Yeah.
Right now, the value in solar for recyclers, and maybe the recyclers that are recycling solar speak to this, is not recovering those particular materials. So you can make a product valuable, but unless you make it valuable in the way that actually extracts the most long-term value in terms of us, the society, you're not going to get the recycling system that's recovering indium and tellurium until you'll get glass recycling with
Right,
solar panels.
right.
As opposed
See, and I
to
think
other
smart
things.
companies are going to figure out that if they actually design their products for recovery and lease them, especially things like photovoltaics, or have a return so at the end of life they get them back. 30 years from now, do you have any idea how valuable some of these materials are going to be and how much they're going to have to pay to actually mine them or get them from some other place? They're going to be like thankful that they got those coming back to them.
And I just add one thing that companies that use tellurium, solar companies, have to report that as a risk to their investors, that there's a market cap on
Yeah.
the availability of tellurium in the global.
Okay, last question in the back there.
Well, it's really not a question, it's a
Okay,
sort
last
of a
statement in the back.
commentary. First of all, I want to clarify something. You said from Dell that California recyclers get whatever they want, and we don't. We'd like to. Jim, wouldn't we like to? We'd like to. But there is a set here. There is a cost net report, and the state sets that price. And we are concerned what Dell would try to get out of the recyclers. One thing that California does do and provides is a adequate cost analysis and benefit to us so we can do it right and handle the material in the manner it should be handled. And the disposition of that material is handled in the right way. But retailers, we haven't found to be receptive to our programs. And manufacturers, we haven't found to be receptive. And producer responsibility, really the first point and most important point is how do they build that material and what's in them, because we're taking them apart and our workers are the people who are exposed to that.
Right.
And we would like to make it a lot easier and safer for our workers, knowing that the producers produced a piece of product that didn't have to make them worry about what was in it. That's number one. But Walmart or any of those companies, when you tell them and they say they want to be green and we tell them to be green, it means they have to pay some green to do that. They don't want to be a part of it. They don't want any part of having to produce green to be green. They want you to say, oh, well, we'll let you use Walmart's name. Well, I don't really give a damn about Walmart or anybody else. There's a price to pay. And you know who's paid it in California? It's a consumer. And they've been proud to do it. California has one of the best programs in the country. It has collected more, it has done it right, and it has disposed and disposition of that material right. A combination of producer responsibility certainly is an option, and I think we could expand the amount of material and types of material in California that's subject to being brought in so we can use it, and that would certainly be nice to include the producers into that and get them into the system. Government bureaucracy? I don't think so. This has been a small program, a program with a limited amount of people who have conducted it, and it has raised more money than any other state, and it has done a better job than any other state. So I welcome the producers. I think they ought to jump in. I think they ought to expand California's program. And yeah, we have some problems in California that we can address in the bill and some of the things we do and the regulations we have to put up with to deal with. But no state is more regulated than California, and I really like the program. So I think we can expand it, and we'd love to have the producers join in and help us expand that program.
All right, well, we are out of time. I'd like you to thank our panelists here. We'll have another panel in about 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to take a little coffee break. We've got some refreshments outside. Take a quick break, and we'll get the second panel up here and continue the discussion.
Okay, so I know all. Fantastic. I love this. Super complicated.
Started. Lively conversation the first round, and it's going to continue hopefully with the second panel here. Once again, we've what we did is we tried to split the kind of policy discussion from more the markets, but the two, as you saw, get intermingled. And so I fully expect that we'll kind of go back to some of the policy discussions, because the policy plays into how the markets work. But once again, we've assembled a great distinguished group of folks here to talk about more how, a little bit more about the how you actually deal with these electronics, once they've been collected. Whereas the first session really talked a lot more about the collection side of it. At the end of the day, you have to, recycling isn't collecting. Recycling is actually taking those materials that come back in and turning it into something useful. And so we've got a great bit of expertise again. And as I did with the last round, what I'd like for you all to do is to give a brief introduction of who you are and how you fit into the grand scheme of things here, so that the audience can get a sense of that. I've got some questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience and see if we can get things continuing in the lively manner that we started. So, Sheila, you want to?
Sure. My name is Sheila Davis, and I'm with the Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition. Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition has been around for almost 30 years now, and we got started, of course, because of groundwater contamination in the San Jose area from the high-tech industry. So it was kind of the first understanding that there are environmental impacts from the high-tech industry, which everybody up until that point really had called the clean industry. So we kind of have followed the life cycle of the products in the past 30 years, and think what it looked like 30 years ago, where most people didn't even have a desktop. And that's actually when the company started to scale up. That's when they realized in San Jose and in the Valley and expand in order to make hard drives. That's when they really started to have the impact and realize that there was a lot of contamination that's happening. So we've looked at the use phase, we've looked at workers' impacts, and then of course we looked at end of life. So I got started because I wanted, quite a while ago, almost 15 years ago, I wanted to actually collect products at the curbside. Thought it was a good economic development kind of activity to get young kids involved and transitional workers involved in collecting electronics and recycling them, and found out that you can't do it. That it wasn't at that time especially cost effective, because you were competing with China. People just said, well, you could send it to China and get 2 cents a pound, and I found out that it was costing like $700 a ton to recycle here. And so I was incredibly embarrassed of my numbers when we got the numbers back, and so I wanted to find out what happened to the material when it went overseas. And we hooked up with the Basel Action Network, and they actually went overseas and did an investigation and found out what happened, and you see all the videos. And as a result, we've been working on recycling. And I became a big advocate. And later I'll talk about some of the ways that we've actually influenced markets at SVTC.
Thanks for inviting me to the panel. This is a discussion we have at the Green Citizen Center every day. My name is James Gow. I'm the founder and CEO for Green Citizen. It's about 10 years ago in October that I watched the PBS program about Bill Moyle about exporting home, and that's the episode produced by the Silicon Valley Toxic Coalition and BANG. And I was shocked to find out that 80% of electronic is dumped illegally globally. And I just couldn't get it out of my mind. So for the next 2 years, from 2002 and 2004, I traveled off and on around the world and looked at a different system in Europe, in Asia, in US, and I found that electronic recycling is basically an afterthought. You know, after you buy it, nobody really take care of it. No country know how to do it. And after a lot of due diligence, I decided that, you know, to create a business which basically looking from the consumer and business perspective, what would you like to have? So Green Citizen has been around for 7 years. We have 4 eco center around the Bay Area, and we will end up with 8 in the Bay Area. Essentially, what the eco center does is that it's run by an environmental science graduate from a leading college, who understand the issue very well. So you can drop in to learn about EWaste crisis, and then you can repair or recycle your computer, or you can schedule for business pickup. And I think 10 years ago, Renee Sandinas was working in HP, and I called her up and said, can I come visit? It was one of the due diligence process 10 years ago, and I also visited ECS at the time. So essentially that this is a big issue, but if we were buying electronic, like we were recycling electronic, we would be standing in line in the AT&T park, you know, waiting to buy that iPhones that you have, and that's not how we buy, right? You know, we would have, so this whole reverse infrastructure is completely broken. So basically, we're trying to develop that. So I'll talk more about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm Renee St. Dennis, and I have known everybody in this panel most of my life, it seems like. I got started in this electronics recycling industry about 18 years ago, and I worked for a major manufacturer who shall remain nameless. But like Sheila, yeah, 2 letters. But like Sheila, I had the opportunity to go to China and see what happened to the products that I was responsible for, and realized that that wasn't a great thing. So went to work with a mining company, Noranda, built a recycling facility in Roseville, California, one of the first of its kind. It's still there. And I eventually transitioned to working for Sims Recycling Solutions. Sims is the largest electronics recycler in the world. You hear lots of people say I'm the biggest or whatever those numbers are, but the way we measure it is, first of all, Sims has 50 plants in 35 countries around the world. Nobody can touch that. And these are plants that we own and operate. These are not partner facilities where we license our name to somebody or have a offhand contract with them. In addition to that, Sims is a subsidiary of Sims Metal Management, which is the world's largest metals recycler and is a publicly traded company. So we approach this with a particular kind of caution as a publicly traded company. We can't afford to have any bad headlines. We are first and foremost concerned about our worker safety, which we find is an important part of this business and something that sometimes is overlooked. We have the ability to invest in lots of R&D and, like Jim, are always looking at new technologies, trying to figure out how to solve this problem. But when we talk about markets, and what I want to talk about today is the role of the manufacturers in coming up with some of those solutions. And so with that, Jim?
Hi, I'm Jim Taggart. I'm the owner, or the CEO and river engineer of ECS Refining. We've been around 32 years processing electronics and other things. We process jet engines. We have a tin lead smelter in Texas, the cleanest lead operation in the country in terms of processing. We've got a couple of major plants for processing electronics, and our program has always been to try to solve the problems technically, you know, to be a separations company, and we do separations manually, mechanically, with sensors, chemically, pyro, and so forth. So there's, one of the things I sort of want to do is highlight how complex this issue really is, and how we simplify it by shoving it in containers and shipping it over to China, where it goes away. But the reality is most of these devices have 40 or so different materials in them, and many of which are considered hazardous or become hazardous if they're not treated properly. And we have the laws in this country to protect, to assure that it gets done right if we assure that the stuff stays here. But our government has sort of chosen to deregulate these hazardous wastes so we can move them around in commerce, and then after doing that, they then are able to be exported as a scrap metal or as an excluded material, and they haven't changed their characteristics. They're still hazardous when they get to where they're going, and the people that are handling them are not in any way sophisticated enough to be handling them. They're not protected. They're so it's not a good solution. So a lot of things we're going to talk about are sort of about tweaking all these things, but to me the one biggest thing that we could do is to prohibit the export of these goods to third world nations, which we're doing as a country illegally when you look at the Basel Commission, and there's a few countries that we sort of keep company with, like North Korea and Afghanistan and Pakistan, that have not signed that.
That's the group of four.
And the countries we're shipping this to have signed it, and this stuff's being smuggled into those countries and handled inappropriately. So I just want to sort of set the stage there. And there is something that we can all do here. There's legislation going through Congress right now to eliminate the export, to basically come into compliance with the rest of the world. And that's the Coalition of American Recyclers, and it would be helpful for anybody to go online and sign up as a member of that, because we're trying to build support across the country for this, and we're having a fair amount of success at getting it going. It's not a fringe operation. The largest people in the industry are members: Sims, Waste Management, Covanta now, and about 60 other e-waste recyclers. Dell, HP, Apple, Samsung, LG all support this. There's many more, so it's not, again, Best Buy. It's
So Jim, that begs the question,
yes.
Right? So we get the legislation passed at a federal level that says we can't export this end-of-life electronics, right? Or however it's phrased.
Right.
So then what happens to it here? Is there the capacity to Andre was talking about California has gathered 1 point whatever billion pounds of this stuff. Can we handle that here in North America?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's not a problem. Sometimes economics come into play, but the state of California doesn't need to solve that problem. Or if they do it by tweaking the rules so that the glass that comes from that can be recycled into other products, as opposed to only back.
Right, we don't need leaded glass because nobody's buying leaded glass anything here.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So if we've got the capacity to handle this stuff, but we also heard in the last panel that from a federal legislation standpoint, don't hold your breath. We're not seeing much of anything happen at a federal level. Now, hopefully, we're wrong about this, but if we make the assumption that we aren't going to have federal legislation anytime soon, what are the kind of drivers that can drive us towards, the market to keep it here? What do you guys see as being successful at managing this appropriately versus the disincentives that we see here?
The manufacturers requiring people to use e-stewards for recycling their materials.
Okay, so the audience may not be familiar with e-stewards. Sheila, you want to?
Sure. The e-stewards is a certification program process that's audited, that outlines or has a framework of or principles that recyclers will follow. And what happened is, and just a little bit of background, when we started working on a campaign to try to get manufacturers to take back their products, they start taking back some of the products, but they were doing it in really irresponsible ways. They might have been using prison labor, or they would take it back and then export it still. And so we came up with a set of principles that we call the Pledge of Stewardship, that basically said that recyclers would sign saying that they wouldn't export, they wouldn't use prison labor, they wouldn't incinerate it, et cetera. And that's been, since has been turned into a certification process by the Basel Action Network. And maybe Jim can say how many recyclers have actually been certified. The certification was actually officialized. That's a word.
I'm not sure that is, but we know what you mean.
Okay. Good at making them up. About a year and a half ago. And quite a few recyclers nationally, as well as internationally now, are e-stewards. And it's a really important program, not only for the recyclers so that they behave responsibly, but also for customers and consumers so that you can actually responsibly go and take your product to get recycled.
And I'd like to point out, so Sheila, absolutely, but you all need to know a certification is a baseline. It's the floor. It is not the ceiling. A certification is only as good as the paper it's written on. There's a competing certification. We don't need to get into why they compete. I think the whole thing's kind of dumb, but there are two. Some people have both. Some people have one. But no matter which one you have, it's your responsibility as a consumer, whether you own a business or someone sending their thing off to be recycled independently, to do some due diligence and follow up yourself and ask some, pretty easy questions about where does this stuff go, and then think about whether those answers make sense. The auditors come in one day, they look at a few pieces of paper, and they can sign off on something. But boy, the next day, everything will go out the back door and no one's going to see. So, we like to think of it that way. And so what we do as STIMS, and I think Jim and probably James do the same thing, is invite our customers in. Come in unannounced and see what we do. We think that's an even better way to prove that we're following not only the law, but the standards we've set for ourselves.
The best way to differentiate, the first level cutoff points, if you go to recycle with a company and they make it sound like you're just walk in the park and you're just just going down the block type of things, and they don't tell you specifically how they process, how they accounted for, how they track them, then you can be sure they probably are not doing it properly, because they try to oversimplify the issue. As Jim says, in the manufacture of your beloved iPhone or whatever, it takes hundreds of companies to invent the technology, to put it together, to test it, to ship it, to market it. The same process, the same reverse of their supply chain, is called reverse supply chain, is completely missing. Now, SIM and ECS are much bigger company. What Green Citizen is addressing is the first mile problem. Let's say that the world is full of SIMs and ECS and on-site. There's a lot of good recyclers out there. But as a consumer, how do you get it from your home and your business to start down the right path to get there? And that's what we are about. We put a center where population is. Our center here is in Berkeley is 6 blocks away from here. So I would imagine you would prefer to go 6 blocks to recycle than drive all the way down to San Jose or Roseville. Sorry to pick on you on that, to recycle. So as I said, if they oversimplify it, they don't tell you how they do it, and it's not credible. You're all smart, intelligent. If they can give you a credible answer, and that's probably the first batch you should just eliminate.
So one of the things that was talked about in the earlier panel is that, or maybe one of you mentioned it, there's maybe 40 different materials in a typical piece of electronics. I can't imagine that all 40 of those have value at the end of life. You know, give us a sense of how much.
They don't until they're separated.
Okay.
So, you know, you might look at a device and say, this got negative value before you process it. Once you've processed it, then the job is to get it separated into different commodity types that can then do have.
Right. If you've got a big enough pile and you can separate it into enough piles, you can create value. But
right, and that's the problem, Tony. Right, there isn't an economic way to make some of these piles big enough. You and I know about the plastics issues, right?
Sure.
There are myriad different plastics in electronics. Tony and I spent way too much time and too much brain power trying to figure out how you recycle all these very, very different streams, of which there might not be a whole bunch in any one.
And then even if you could separate them, they're all in different colors, and
Absolutely.
and nobody wants that army green that comes from it or whatever.
Exactly, and you know, I worry sometimes when we talk about ourselves as electronics recyclers. I've started to think of it a little bit differently. We're not recyclers, Jim. We're electronic separators. Right? Our job is to get clean piles, but we don't turn the steel into something new or the plastic into something new. Okay. And in some ways, that piece of the marketplace is one that's really critical and seems to be missing for some of these specialty materials.
Yeah. Can I add, though, that it is the manufacturer's responsibility here in terms of design to think about the materials that they put in a product. If they're putting 40 different types of materials, and most of them are either too difficult to separate or they have no value in the marketplace once they're recovered.
Right.
And so that's where design for recycling or design for the environment comes in, and that's where, of course, take back and that whole giving back.
So I like to add, I started my career as a software engineer working for HP, so I want to look at this from a technical perspective and even from a philosophical perspective. Have you realized that the smartest engineers, the smartest inventor go to invent the product? We don't have the smartest engineer, the smartest chemist, mechanical engineer to design the end-of-life processing cycle. So I hope that through this discussion that if we can inspire a couple of you to want to take that, what Renee is talking about is actually a technology problem. If you have a machine that can easily detect the different type of plastic and be able to efficiently separate it out, then there's a possibility to create a green industry in the United States using a combination of machine and workforce here, and to create a kind of industry. And we'll do it a lot more efficiently than ship it to China or Africa. So I think there's a lot of technology limitation. And I think Sheila talked about it is the manufacturer's responsibility. That is true, but because manufacturer is a for-profit entity, they have to report to their investor. So they have to return the investment money. So they're under pressure to produce item, and because of the deadline, they don't quite understand all the material they're using it. They just know we have to use this material to make this product. They don't have time to figure out the consequence of that because of the pressure on that kind of.
Well, and they have mixed signals that they're getting too. I mean, if you look at a laptop as an example, do we buy our laptops based on end of life considerations? For the most part, no. We look at, how big is the hard drive, how big is the screen, how long is the battery going to last, all those kind of things,
and
right?
And how cheap is it?
And the price. So I had an old dead laptop sitting around, and I pulled just one little panel off it. I think the hard drive was underneath this panel. So this is just a little thin piece of black plastic here. And, you look at this and you say, this should just be, PCABS or whatever, Well, it's not, right? There's these two screws that are attached to this that are, steel or whatever. There's these little labels there's 5 labels on the back of this that, takes some significant strength to pull off. They're really well adhered. There's some covering of the grill here that probably provides some kind of shielding. There's another piece that I have no reason whatsoever why it's there. This is painted probably with a paint that provides shielding because there's laws associated with what kind of emissions come off of these. I mean, what you would think would be this rather simple little piece of plastic to cover the hard drive turns out not to be so simple.
And then these guys have got to figure out how to recycle this, and it's tough. But I can also imagine from a designer standpoint, they've got a tough job too, in terms of how to meet customer needs and the UL requirements and the other things. Yeah, Sheila.
Yeah, I think that we underestimate the companies and that they have a lot of capacity, and especially if you get other people involved. With the solar industry, we felt like we had an opportunity to kind of do over. That all the things that we kind of missed and we didn't know with the electronic industry, now we can actually apply to the solar industry. And they're a young industry. Not everybody can afford or buy solar panels right now, but investors are a key component of that.
Right.
And so what we did was we went to the investors and asked the investors to ask the solar companies to recycle and to have some sustainable practices. And I think that's important that not only investors, who are a key component, but also the customers also ask for design for the environment, or are you recycling, or are you designing it properly?
Right.
And I think the other area that we're underestimating companies in is in the design.